Nigel Farage is in trouble. He's certainly rattled. Now, there are two scandals which have enveloped the leader of Reform UK, someone who's got a pretty good chance of becoming the next British Prime Minister, or the British Prime Minister after the person who replaces Keir Starmer when he's toppled by his own party, whatever. Anyway, formerly, of course, the leader of the Brexit Party, formerly the leader of UKIP. It is worth just taking a step back before we discuss these scandals, because Farage is one of the the most consequential single British politician of our age. And that was true before he'd even won a parliamentary seat, which he only did last year after having stood for a Westminster seat 7 times and being defeated 7 times. No one has done more to make Brexit happen than Farage, and to make the particularly extreme form of Brexit happen, with all the economic damage that has inflicted. No one has done more to make immigration the political obsession of this country, meaning politicians and media outlets obsess over making migrants and refugees the scapegoats for all our problems, rather than challenging the wealthy, vested elites who are really to blame, like the banks who plunged this country and indeed the world into a catastrophe from which we have never recovered, like the corporate titans who won't pay their workers properly, like the rich tax dodgers, like the rip-off landlords. We could go on. That failure to confront the actual cause of our problems, an economic system rigged in favour of wealthy elites, is why we're in the mess we are in. The longest squeeze in wages in modern history, collapsing public services, broken communities, and all of the anger and disillusionment that comes out of that. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not saying Nigel Farage is this single-handedly managed to do all of the things like Brexit and making immigration dominant, all the rest of it. The fact is there's huge anger and disillusionment out there because of a broken economic system, and he's managed to funnel some of that anger into a toxic direction. That speaks partly to the failure of alternatives to take the anger and put it in the correct direction, to hold those actually responsible for our problems to account. Now, Farage has normally got a big old smirk on his face, and no wonder. To say he's had an easy ride from the media is understating the reality. The truth is the British media helped create him, not simply with their decades-long focus on blaming the foreigner for all our problems, but building him up personally, like the BBC, which basically made him a permanent fixture of their flagship discussion show Question Time. Farage's party has now been consistently way ahead in the polling, with many polls suggesting that his party could win a massive landslide at the next election, even when they only get a third of the vote because of our electoral system. It's increasingly farcical how our electoral system works. I mean, at the last election, Labour only won a third of the vote on an abysmal turnout, but they won 2/3 of the seats. Well, now 2 scandals have emerged concerning Reform UK. One is about alleged shocking racism from when Nigel Farage was at Dulwich College, the major public school he went to. For a non-British audience, this is confusing, but public school means a major posh private school. Farage is the son of a stockbroker and followed his father's footsteps into big finance. Now, before we go into the specifics of the claims, which of course Farage challenges, well, we'll see. Let's see what happens. Farage profusely, supposedly opposes, of course, these claims. He denies them, but how does he deny them? I just want to it's quite an extraordinary clip, this. Let's just hear Farage being questioned about these allegations by an ITV reporter.
Did you racially abuse fellow pupils when you were at school?
No, this is 49 years ago, by the way. 49 years ago. Have I ever tried to take it out on any individual on the basis of where they're from? No.
At school, categorically on the record, you did not racially abuse fellow pupils?
I would never, ever do it in a hurtful or insulting way.
That's not quite the same as not doing it.
It's 49 years ago. It's 49 years ago.
What difference does the time make?
Isn't it? Well, I just entered my teens. Can I remember everything that happened at school? No, I can't. Have I ever been part of an extremist organisation or engaged in direct, unpleasant personal abuse, genuine abuse, on that basis? No.
You're not quite... That's very, very caveated. You're not quite ruling this out. The question is, did you ever racially abuse fellow pupils in school? No. You've caveated it with a hurtful way.
Not with intent.
What do you mean not with intent? I don't understand what you mean by not with intent. What does that mean?
You wouldn't do.
But what does that mean?
No.
No what?
No. I have never directly really tried to go and hurt anybody.
Extraordinary. absolutely extraordinary. Probably a polished operator. Farage is an exceptional communicator. You should always, I think, not pay tribute to your opponent's skills, but you should certainly acknowledge them. You shouldn't underestimate your opponents. Farage is an extremely gifted communicator. I mean, it's not hard given the British political landscape. I mean, most of our politicians are like, they're like, no offense to middle managers, but they're like, they are like middle managers. Or like a lot of them come across as, and this is not to attack supply teachers, to be clear, but if a supply teacher was told at the last minute to do, like a presentation in a class, they didn't really know much about it. You know what I mean? That they are minnows. I might, whatever problems I have with politicians of the past, huge problems, they were formidable people, formidable, charismatic. They had hinterlands, they had beliefs, visions. Anyway, Farage, because of how shit other politicians are, he can come across as a very good communicator. But what happened here then? Notice his caveated answer, as the ITV reporter puts it. He doesn't go, no, this is absolute nonsense. How dare I abhor racism? I would never, ever have said anything like this. How dare you? How dare anyone say this? He just starts going on about intent, about never having really tried to hurt someone. So it goes for kind of subjective defenses, kind of, what's going on, this is whatever people say, this is what was going on in my head, in my mind, and how can anyone dispute that, because no one has windows into people's souls. You can't objectively know as a fact what someone's thinking. You can just go off the way they behave. But I think what's rare for Farage is he looks rattled there, doesn't it? Now, these claims have been made before, but the Guardian newspaper has been doing extensive coverage about this. I'm going to go through what the Guardian says about this. At least 20 of his former school contemporaries have come forward. That includes a BAFTA-winning director, Peter Tedgi, who is Jewish. Now, this is what he says. He would sidle up to me and growl, Hitler was right, or gas them, sometimes adding a long hiss to simulate the sound of the gas chambers. That's what Tedgi says. Now, the Guardian says as a disclaimer, in recent weeks, the Guardian has heard allegations from more than a dozen school contemporaries of Farage who recount incidents of deeply offensive behaviour throughout his teenage years. This is not the whole picture. All those who knew Farage then remember he was bumptious, rude, provocative, and enjoyed being the centre of attention. No change. But do not recall the behaviour described by Tedgi and others. There was no claim that Farage, the man, must still hold the same views as the ones ascribed to Farage, the boy, but their memories of him left marks, ones that haven't dissolved with the passage of time and are often revealed again when he talks about issues such as immigration. They add, in legal letters to The Guardian, he has emphatically denied saying anything racist or anti-Semitic when he was a teenager. There's also questioned whether there is any public interest in airing allegations that date back over 40 years. And further, they say, after weeks of asking, a spokesperson for Reform UK gave a statement. These allegations are entirely without foundation, they said. The Guardian has produced no contemporaneous record or corroborating evidence to support these disputed recollections from nearly 40 years ago. According to Tedgi, Farage could suddenly switch from hostility, become disarmingly affable, even charming. But from my experience, there's no doubt in my mind that he was a profoundly, precociously racist teenager. I'd like to know why he's never owned up or shown the slightest contrition. Furthermore, Farage at the time, this is what The Guardian says, Farage at the time was 13 or 14, too young to know better. A second people from a minority ethnic background claimed he was similarly targeted by 17-year-old Farage. I was very small in one of the junior classes of the time, and you know that the sixth formers were probably 17, very tall, much taller than me. And that person's walk, it's the same walk he has now, I'll never forget it. He walked up to a pupil flanked by two similarly tall mates and spoke to anyone looking different, in quotes. That included me on 3 occasions, asking me where I was from and pointing away, saying, that's the way back to wherever you replied you were from. And it was a very horrible ordeal, he says. Honestly, at the time, it was just quite perplexing. Walking from the upper school via the middle school past different amenities to adapt in the lower school playground, right? You've walked all that distance to do what you want to do. I thought to come over and just say that, I mean, he will never be forgotten. The former people said sometimes Farage and others would wait at the lower school gate for pupils being dropped off by their parents. He says the thought of it still creates fear and anger within me, and the look you get from a person who does not see your humanity, but just that you look different, has reached a conclusion about you, even before you even open your mouth to speak. Now, The Guardian discusses allegations reported by the former Channel 4 News reporter Michael Crick. They say Crick had obtained a letter from an English teacher at Dulwich College, Chloe Deacon. In it, she had opposed the decision in 1981 by the master of Dulwich College to make Farage a prefect when he was 17, describing him as having publicly professed racist and neo-fascist views. Deacon, who did not know Farage personally, went on to say that a colleague had reported that at the Combined Cadet Force, CCF, camp organised by the college, Farage and others had marched through a quiet Sussex village very late at night, shouting Hitler Youth songs. The Guardian has spoken to 7 former members, they say, of the CCF. That includes 2 who marched with Farage in Sussex, where Deacon alleged he sang Hitler Youth songs. None of them recalled, they say, those specific songs being sung. But the Guardian goes on, but there were other memories that some feel have not been acknowledged in Reform's angry denunciations of Lammy's comments. So, another former pupil says, I was in the CCF with him from 1979 to 1982 or so. Farage did teach the younger members of the CCF the infamous Gas 'Em All song, or at least led the singing of it on CCF coaches to training areas. And the Guardian say that the song, various of which were heard on English football terraces in the 1980s, is sung to the tune of George Formby's Bless 'Em All. One version runs, gas 'em all, gas 'em all, gas 'em all, and into the showers they crawl. We'll gas all the N-words. We'll gas all the Jews. Come on, you lads, gas 'em all. The former people added there were black, Asian, and Jewish CCF cadets on the bus. As I say, no one, one of them asked me not to sing it or make those sorts of comments, and I didn't. They add, I liked him. I was just being a bit silly. I suppose from that perspective, you could put it down to schoolboy racism. But they added, they believe with Farage, a sort of divisive behaviour seems to have persisted. Another classmate claims Farage would sing a song along the lines of Gassam, adding he would also regularly perform the Nazi Sieg Heil salute. In sixth form, he became much more kind of political and right-wing and shockingly so, they recall, or report. We all kind of grew up in the shadow of the Second World War. Our grandparents fought the Second World War, so you didn't question that Hitler was wrong. They added somebody kind of outwardly doing Nazi salutes, strutting about the classroom, doing kind of saying things like Hitler was right and all that stuff was pretty shocking and therefore very memorable. It was habitual, it happened all the time. He would often be doing Nazi salutes and saying Sieg Heil, and, strutting around the classroom. He was a member of the cadet force, so often being in uniform. And yeah, it might have been for shock value partly, but I think, clearly he also is very right-wing politically. He further said, in reference to the British movement, later called the British National Socialist Movement, Farage would chant, BM, BM, we are British Nazi men. Another claim that when Farage became school prefect, he singled out a child of British Asian heritage and put him in detention for no reason whatsoever. They say, I was flabbergasted, absolutely stunned. I was just disgusted, really. No rhyme or reason, just purely based on the colour of his skin. Another claims he would chant the name of Oswald Mosley, the British fascist leader, regularly. Another Jewish people says, I have a very strong memory of him using the W word for what we now call people of Afro-Caribbean origin and the P word for those of South Asian origin. I don't remember being on the receiving end of anti-Semitic remarks, though of course he made outrageous comments about the war. I don't think Jews were his main racial preoccupation. He was generally obsessed, as he is now, with the erosion of Britishness. Another said what sticks in the mind most is not just his odious and prejudicial opinions towards black, Asian and minority ethnic students, but how central and public these views were to his whole school persona. Now, the Guardian goes on to say Crick had also found that for every person who recalls racist behaviour, there was one who had no such experience. Farage could be friendly with children from minority ethnic backgrounds. There is no evidence that Farage has ever been a member of far-right organisations. Crick has concluded that Farage, the man, is not racist. Now, other peoples also came forward subsequently about him chanting Oswald Mosley's name, also saying he said Hitler was right in Gassen. One chant, we gas them all, into the chambers they crawl. We'll gas all the PAKS, we'll gas all the YIDs, and we'll gas all the COONS and all their fucking kids. Now, given Farage's denials, yet more former pupils came forward rejecting his claims it was banter, describing it as targeted, persistent, and nasty. To quote one former pupil, Stefan Bamanok, claimed that people emerging from Jewish assembly at Dulwich College had been in the sights of Farage and others for taunts of a second Cyrus Oshidar, described as rubbish the claim that the reform leader did not act with intent to hurt. Being called a P-word isn't hurtful, Oshidar asked. A third, Ricard Berg, told The Guardian he's now in a position where he shouldn't be denying this, he's straight up lying. No, a lot of the time I'd say, look, focusing on what someone said and believed as a teenager is not the road we want to go down. I think the problem here, the allegations are about systematic, relentless behaviour spanning many years. The allegations are actually about racist behaviour and bullying, like the bullying and targeting of people. That's the accusations, which, you know, can have lifelong scars. That's the suggestion, of course, in the interviews. And of course, for the sake of the country, it's about how much his current views represent a departure from what he believed then, which is what his former peers are querying. Now, what's the other scandal? The other scandal concerns Nathan Gill, the former leader of Reform UK in Wales. He's been sentenced for 10.5 years in prison after taking bribes for pro-Russia interviews and speeches involving up to £40,000 to help pro-Russian politicians in Ukraine. This is from when he was a member of the European Parliament and took money. Reform UK says his actions were reprehensible, treasonous and unforgivable. But Farage used to be a big fan of Nathan Gill.
But in particular, it's a big victory for Nathan Gill, our leader in Wales, an honest, decent, honourable man who's been loyal to me and the party at all times. Nathan, you've led UKIP Wales into this, and well done you.
It's perfectly reasonable for Farage to not know Gill was being bribed by Russia. But he probably didn't notice, I don't know, Nathan Gill saying pro-Putin things, given the sorts of things that Farage was saying without being bribed. Like this.
In the war against Islamic extremism, Vladimir Putin, whatever we may think of him as a human being, is actually on our side. I suggest we grow up.
To be clear, that doesn't make Farage an isolated voice. In 2018, the former British Labour Prime Minister Tony Blair said we should work with Russia against what he called radical Islam. That's the same Putin who wiped Chechnya from the face of the earth and killed countless thousands of innocent people, which the West indulged and justified at the time during the so-called war on terror. But, you know, going on with Farage, he talked about his admiration on Putin, which he said wasn't on a personal level, but he said as a political operator.
I was asked a couple of months ago, which world leader did I admire? And I said Vladimir Putin as an operator.
So he was questioned about this in 2024 during the general election campaign on the BBC.
Let's look at the man who you said was the statesman you most admire.
No, I said
Vladimir Putin.
Hold a second. I said I disliked him.
But you said you admired him.
I said I disliked him.
But you admired him.
As a person, but admired him as a political operator because he's managed to take control of running Russia.
It's really bizarre there. The distinction between Putin as a person and a political operator. I mean, he says that on the grounds that he's managed to take control of Russia. Yes, he's definitely managed to take control of Russia. I don't think anyone disputes that. I think it's his authoritarian political operation rather than his personal qualities that should be most objectionable. That's the point. You know, if you're a consistent believer in democracy, then obviously Putinism should not in any way be your back. You know, as for Farage's position of foreign leaders, what matters most right now is his relationship with Donald Trump. And clearly, if he was prime minister, in my view, he'd clearly make Britain a vassal state of Trump. He'd put the interests of Trump first rather than the interests of Britain. It's already bad enough under Keir Starmer's so-called Labour government. But this whole brand of politics is around, rah, 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 look how patriotic we are. Look at us waving the Union Jack. We love Britain. Make your own judgment. What really matters here, too, is that reform-back economic policies which would redistribute wealth and power in favour of the elites at the expense of the majority. Farage praised Liz Truss's catastrophic mini-budget, where she tried to cut taxes on the wealthy and crash the economy. He called it at the time the best Conservative budget since 1986. Will any of this stick? Personally, I feel that unless the left gets its act together and offers a compelling alternative that answers people's grievances and challenges a broken system, or a system that's not broken if you're rich, then given all the terrible failures of the Labour government, then Farage has every chance of ending up in number 10. That's why it's so reassuring to see Zach Polanski and the Greens surging. But look, guys, we've got a long few years ahead of us. Please like and subscribe. Leave your thoughts in your comments. Help us take on the dire mainstream media in this country overall. Not all. Some good stuff. I've quoted some good work there from colleagues at Guardian. But obviously trying to do best to offer, a counterbalance to the overall problem. At patreon.com/OwenJones84. I keep saying I'm finishing my book, The Fall of the West. When I do that, I can focus more on the videos. The West keeps falling. What can I do about it? It's just too much material. Like, subscribe, share, leave comments, share the video. I'll speak to you in a bit.